Alright, so for me this coming week, my students will be analyzing the demographic transition model. And for those of you that don't know, this is just a fancy way of saying how countries are ranked in the world on the Human Development Index, using birth rate, death rate, literacy rate, and things like that. So for my students, the established goal is that they will have to understand that the demographic transition model and the Human Development Index is a reflection of a country's type of government and also their economic system. Because as soon as we begin introducing the demographic transition model, we begin introducing the different types of government and also the different types of economies, since those do both play a major impact in where a country is ranked on the transition model, and it also plays a big part into how well advanced the lives of the people are in those respective countries. For my students, the desired understandings that I have will be that the students will have to understand that a country's place um, on the demographic transition model, their stage is reflective of a government's policies, and then also how the government's policies impact birth rate, death rate, literacy rate, and the country's individual stage of development. And then I also want my students to understand that a country's place on the model will also affect global settlement patterns, the elements of culture, in terms of cultural convergence and cultural divergence, and how language is spread out, how religion is spread out, and things like that. And then also how a country's place on the model also impacts cultural patterns within the country and lifestyles of the people within the country as well. And then for this, I expect my students to be able to create a political cartoon that illustrates a country's type of government and their type of economy, and how it is reflective of the country's place on the demographic transition model. Um, this is a very complex lesson. It's actually a lesson that's spread out over about a week and a half, um, just because of the depth of knowledge that's required of the students to grasp and also show that they've learned. It's a very culminating activity, and for this, I'm also having my students develop their own country, so that they're able to model how their government and how their economy would place their country on a demographic transition model. So, for example, I had a student the other day saying, "Well, if in my country I'm going to be the dictator, and in my dictatorship, my people will have very minimal rights, and in the economy they will not be able to do as much." And so, after some thought and analysis, the student was able to explain how their country would be very poorly rated on the demographic transition model. It would be a stage 2 or a stage 3 country, which means they would have a very high birth rate and very high death rates because of the levels of oppression that they'd be facing due to the fact that this student chose to have a very impoverished country. Whereas one of his peers openly stated, "Well, I'm going to have a republic, much like the United States. However, unlike the United States, they plan to have a culture in which it the people are not oppressed nearly as much as what we see here in the United States." And then this same student is also from Nepal and Burma, lived in Nepal and was born in Nepal and stayed in Burma, and then went to Thailand through various refugee camps. And they explained to their peer for the reason why they were going to do a republic, and that was because they didn't want to go through the same things that they had seen growing up. So a lot of my students have a lot of prior knowledge already when we talk about the different types of governments and different types of economies, but they have very minimal knowledge on exactly what the stages of development are and also what the Human Development Index is. So for this lesson, it'll be very in depth and very deep, but it'll activate a lot of their prior knowledge, which is a good thing. Is just for this is breaking it down and doing it piece by piece so that they're able to understand. The overall goal is for them to get that a country's type of government and economic policy is a reflection of a country's stage on that demographic transition model, and is also reflective of a country's literacy rate, death rate, birth rate, and place on the Human Development Index. And if they are able to understand and grasp these things and show their mastery through the political cartoons that they're going to be tasked with creating, and also through their own independent country that they will create as part of their 6 weeks project, um, then they will truly understand what is being asked or being shown by that demographic transition model, and also within the demographic transition model, also population pyramids too, which in and of itself is also a taller task to understand, or equally as tall task to understand too. Um, for those of you that aren't social studies strong, I know that was a lot. I'm sorry, but I do hope you find it was informative. That is my goal for my students and what I want them to understand, and what I want them to accomplish for this coming week. I know they'll be successful. This year's group is definitely a lot quicker on their feet than last year's. And then this year's group is just, they're using their prior knowledge a lot more. Things are clicking for them just overall a lot better. So I look forward to getting to introduce these topics with my students and helping them tackle them head on using political cartoons, as well as their project this 6 weeks, which is again creating their own country. So this will definitely be a very interesting week. I hope you all have a great week yourselves. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.